The Duvari sent their arbiter to negotiate humanity's surrender, and they sent me, which tells you everything about how seriously Earth was taking the process. My name is Adaeze Okoro. My official title, as of 72 hours ago, was Deputy Attaché for Secondary Diplomatic Contacts, which is the Foreign Service's way of saying I talk to people nobody else will talk to. My unofficial title, as of 48 hours ago when Ambassador Frey's shuttle lost containment somewhere between Luna and the transit gate, was the only diplomat Earth had left in range of Cathara 9. They didn't tell the Duvari. I didn't tell the Duvari. As far as the Alien Order's compact representatives were concerned, Earth had sent its second-string player because we didn't respect the proceedings enough to send first-string. This was, accidentally, the most effective diplomatic positioning Earth had managed in 3 years of losing this war. Cathara 9 was a neutral station, neutral meaning nobody wanted it badly enough to fight over it, and sufficiently ramshackle that its decontamination systems failed at least twice a week. I found this out when the decon chamber between docking ring 7 and the compact's designated negotiation corridor flooded with a yellow-green chemical mist that smelled like copper and something I couldn't name, and the blast doors locked from both sides. I was on one side. A Duvari I hadn't met yet was on the other side of the chamber, which meant we were both stuck in it. The Duvari communicate through what xenobiologists call consensus chemical signaling, which is the technical way of saying they talk in pheromones. Individual decision-making, as a concept, does not exist for them. Every choice is the product of chemical consensus among members of a bonded group. They don't have the neurological architecture for unilateral action. A Duvari alone is not, by their own definition, a functional being. The one in the decon chamber with me was small, by Duvari standards. Their chromatophores, the light-shifting skin panels along their dorsal ridge, were cycling through gray and a pale, washed-out amber that my briefing documents identified as the color of chemical isolation. They had been cut off from their consensus group, excommunicated, in the most literal sense, removed from the chemical conversation entirely. I had been briefed on this one. Surath, junior attaché, formerly of the Vel-Sarath Consensus Cluster, removed from standing 6 months ago after a procedural disagreement that the briefing documents described in 3 paragraphs of diplomatic language that boiled down to, they had an opinion. In a species where consensus is everything, having an individual opinion is not a personality flaw. It is a medical condition. The decon mist was supposed to neutralize foreign biological compounds. What it actually did, given that the system was malfunctioning, was flood the chamber with a low concentration of the Duvari's own calming pheromone, a chemical that, in a functioning consensus cluster, would signal that everything was fine and decisions could proceed. I wasn't Duvari. The pheromone had no effect on me. But Surath watched me breathe it in and not react, and I watched them watch me, and for approximately 40 seconds, we simply existed in the broken decon chamber together. 2 beings for whom the chemical environment meant completely different things. The system will restore in 11 minutes, Surath said. Their translator rendered the words in flat, standard, no tonal inflection. They were watching my face the way someone watches a phenomenon they cannot classify. 11 minutes, I said. You want to sit down? There was nowhere to sit. It was a decon chamber. I sat on the floor anyway, because my feet hurt, and 11 minutes is 11 minutes. After a pause of approximately 4 seconds, Surath folded their legs beneath them and settled onto the floor as well. Their chromatophores shifted the gray, lightened, fractionally. You are the human diplomat, they said. One of them, I said, which was technically still true, in the sense that one and all can both be accurate depending on your framing. You do not carry the correct authorization markers for a primary negotiator. I carry the authorization markers I have, I said. Another pause. Their chromatophores did something complicated. You are aware, they said, that the compact's terms require a primary negotiator with full planetary authority. I'm aware of what the terms say, and yet you are here. And yet, I agreed. The mist cycled. The fans hummed. Surath watched me with the flat, multifaceted attention of a species that does everything by committee and was currently, through no choice of their own, a committee of one. "What is it like?" they said, very carefully. "To make a decision alone?" It was not the question I expected. I thought about it honestly. "Faster," I said. "Lonelier. You get used to it." Lone. Lear. Their chromatophores went still. Not gray still. A color I didn't have in my briefing documents. The blast doors opened at minute 10. We went our separate ways. In the corridor outside, I looked back once. Surath was still standing in the decon chamber doorway, watching me go with their panels held at that color I couldn't name. I made a decision then alone, the way humans do, and I turned back. "The card game I know takes 2 players, I said. "If you have 4 hours before the formal session, I'm in Cargo Bay 12. Surath came. We shook hands at the end of it, which is a human gesture they had clearly read about but never experienced. And they held my hand for 2 seconds longer than necessary, processing something. When they let go, they said, "I will remember this." "So will I said. Neither of us had the authority to promise anything. We made the promise anyway. The Compact's arbiter gave me 6 hours to produce Earth's formal capitulation. I used 4 of them, teaching Surath to play cards. Velsarath the arbiter, primary consensus voice of the Compact's judgment cluster, had 43 years of diplomatic experience, 17 successful planetary integration processes, and the specific stillness of someone who has never had to wonder whether their opinion aligned with their group's, because for them the distinction did not exist. They were, by any measure, exactly the kind of being you did not want to face across a negotiating table when your credentials were questionable and your planet was losing. They presented the Order's ultimatum in the Compact chamber at the 6th hour. It was a good ultimatum, concise, legally airtight, offering Earth a conditional peace that required surrendering 3 outer system installations and accepting Order oversight of all future human interstellar travel. Velsarath delivered it with the calm of someone reading a weather report, which I had come to understand was simply how Duvari sounded when they were absolutely certain. I let them finish. There is a technique in negotiation where you absorb the full weight of what someone has said before responding, not to be polite, but because people who feel heard make worse decisions. Velsarath was not a person in the human sense, but the technique still applied. The Compact recognizes, I said, that under Provision 7 of the Cathara Conventions, any formal agreement requires the co-signature of a Duvari representative with standing. Correct, Velsarath said. I'm citing Surath of the formerly Velsarath cluster as co-signatory for Earth's response. The chamber went very quiet. There are 31 species represented at Cathara, 9 at any given time, and they all have different physiological responses to shock, but the chamber managed to express a collective version of it anyway. Velsarath was still for 4 full seconds. Surath, they said, has no chemical standing. They are excommunicated from the Compact's consensus. They cannot co-sign any legal proceeding. Under current status, correct, I said. I'm filing, simultaneously, a reinstatement petition on Surath's behalf, citing my authority as a diplomatic representative of a sovereign party to these proceedings. Duvari Law, Article 41, allows an excommunicated member to petition for reinstatement if 2 parties of equal standing vouch for their validity as a legal actor. You are 1 party, Velsarath said. You require 2. Surath is the 2nd, I said. They're vouching for themselves, which Article 41 does not explicitly prohibit. The quiet in the chamber became a different kind of quiet, the kind that precedes a system trying to find an error in logic it hasn't encountered before. Velsarath moved toward me. Not aggressively. Duvari don't do aggression in isolation. It requires consensus, but with the purposeful momentum of someone intending to physically end a proceeding. I did not move. My feet hurt again, but I had decided, alone in Cargo Bay 12, that I was not going to move from this spot until something changed. From the observer section, Surath stood. Every chromatophore on their body was running full amber, not the washed-out exile amber, but a deep, saturated gold that I would later learn was the color Duvari display when they are acting in full individual conviction, which is a color the species theoretically cannot produce, because full individual conviction requires no consensus, and therefore cannot be chemically encoded. I request, Surath said, in the compact chamber, in front of Velsarath and 31 species, and whatever surveillance system the alien order had running, formal recognition of my legal standing. The chamber processed this for 6 seconds. Then the adjudication system automatic, not subject to chemical consensus, logged the petition as received and open. An open petition in Duvari law freezes all enforcement actions pertaining to the petitioning party. Surath was the cited co-signatory of Earth's response. Earth's response was now, technically, attached to an open legal question. You cannot enforce the terms of an agreement that has an unresolved procedural question attached to it. It's in the Compact's own charter, Article 19. Velsarath looked at me. Their chromatophores were doing something I had no briefing document entry for. How long have you been planning this? They said. I've been on this station for 4 hours, I said, which was true and did not answer the question at all. I had bought time. Nobody in the room was entirely sure how, including me. Partly, the specific combination of Surath's willingness to stand up and the adjudication system's automatic logging was not something I had been certain of. There are plans you make in cargo bays with people you've known for 4 hours, and then there is what actually happens, and sometimes they match well enough. Outside the viewport, the stars continued not caring. Inside the chamber, Velsarath filed a formal request for procedural recess and withdrew to their quarters to reach chemical consensus with their cluster. Surath sat back down. Their chromatophores faded slowly from gold back to amber, still the deep amber, not the exile color. Something had changed in the frequency of it. I didn't have the xenobiology training to say what. I sat next to them and did not say anything reassuring, because they didn't need reassurance. They needed someone to sit next to them in a room where they had just done something their species said they couldn't do. After a minute, Surath said, "That was frightening." "Yes," I said. "Is it always frightening, deciding alone?" "Pretty much," I said. "You get used to it." "I do not think I will get used to it." "You did it anyway," I said. Their chromatophores held steady at deep amber. "Yes," they said. "I did." Earth's hidden weapon against the alien order turned out to be a disgraced bureaucrat with no chemical identity and a woman who didn't know when to stop talking to people. The sanctioned vessel dropped out of transit at 0340 station time, 312 kilometers off Cathara, 9's port docking array. It was a Duvari enforcement hull, elongated, blue-black, built for exactly one function. Every tracking system on the station registered it simultaneously. The alert tone was a low, sustained frequency that managed to sound both calm and final, the way a doctor's voice sounds when they're telling you something they've practiced telling people. I had 41 minutes by the station's automated threat assessment. The assessment was optimistic. The sanctioned vessel's drive signature suggested it was already in approach attitude. I left Surath in the observation corridor and went to work. The thing about Cathara 9 is that it is home at any given time to representatives of 31 species, traders, refugees, transit passengers, a Ketharon maintenance crew of 11 who had been meaning to leave for 8 months and kept finding reasons to stay. They are not fighters. None of them signed on for a war, and most of them had very strong opinions about not being present when one arrived. I did not ask them to fight. The Cathara Conventions, authored by the Alien Order, ratified by 46 species including the Duvari Compact, prohibit the use of force against any station, vessel, or installation where a formal multi-species legal proceeding is actively registered and witnessed. The prohibition exists because the Order found it inconvenient when disputes they wanted to resolve militarily kept getting complicated by witnesses. They wrote the rule to protect themselves. Rules written to protect the powerful are still rules. Surath's reinstatement petition was an active legal proceeding. It needed witnesses. I went to the Ketharan maintenance supervisor first, because the Ketharans had been on the station longest, and the other species watched them for social cues. Her name was Preth, and she had 17 fingers and the expression of someone who has repaired the same decon system 40 times and has feelings about it. I need you to formally register as a witness to an open, compact legal proceeding, I said. It takes 4 minutes to file. It puts you on record as an observer to a non-military diplomatic action. Preth looked at me, looked at the threat display on the wall behind me. And the ship outside? Cannot fire on a registered multi-species legal proceeding without triggering Article 18 of the Cathara Conventions, which the Alien Order wrote. Preth was quiet for 3 seconds. 4 minutes to file? 3 if the system is running fast. She filed in 2.5. Then she went and talked to the other Ketharans. I went to the Votali traders in Bay 4. Then the Sethric refugee family in temporary quarters on Level 3. Then the Compact's own administrative staff, who were not Velserath's cluster and had their own chemical opinions about sanction vessels appearing at stations where they were posted. At the 23-minute mark, 23 species had filed formal witness registrations with the station's legal archive. The archive automatically flagged the proceeding as multi-species observed and transmitted the flag to all vessels within 350 kilometers, as required by Ketharan station law. At the 26-minute mark, the sanctioned vessel reduced thrust. I was back in the observation corridor with Surath when the vessel came to a full stop at 280 kilometers and held position. The threat assessment system recalculated and produced a new estimate that was, essentially, a question mark, a situation it had no category for. 23 species, Surath said. They had been watching the registration count climb on the corridor display. 23, I said. You went to all of them. The Sethric family took the most convincing. They have children on board, and I understand the instinct. I had told them the truth, that the safest thing they could do was put their names on a piece of paper that meant a warship couldn't fire without starting a war with 46 signatories. The mother had looked at me with eyes that did not work like human eyes, and reached the same calculation a human mother would have reached. Surath was quiet for a moment. You did not need me, they said. You already had the plan. I thought about how to answer that honestly. The petition needed a Duvari name to be legally valid. That part I needed you for. But the witnesses, the conventions, you knew all of this before you spoke to me in the decon chamber. I knew the legal framework, I said. I didn't know if it would work. Legal frameworks need people to make them real. I knew I'd need someone on this station who the system would recognize. I looked at them. I needed you first. The plan came after. End quote. Their chromatophores held the deep amber. That is a meaningful distinction to you. Yes, I said. Outside, the sanctioned vessel was burning station-keeping fuel at a rate that, by my rough calculation, gave it about 9 hours before it had to either act or retreat. The Alien Order had 9 hours to decide whether a diplomatic bureaucrat and a chemically excommunicated Duvari attaché had just made their enforcement mechanism structurally useless. In the chamber below us, Velserath formally requested a recess of unspecified duration. I sat down on the corridor floor. My feet had been hurting for 6 hours. Surath sat beside me, and their chromatophores did the thing I had no name for, the steady, saturated amber that the briefing documents didn't cover. And outside the viewport, the sanctioned vessel held its position like a question nobody wanted to answer. The Alien Order offered Earth a conditional peace. The condition was me. The offer came through official compact channels at 0619, logged and time-stamped, routed to my credentials through the station's diplomatic comm system. It was brief and legally precise. Earth would receive a full ceasefire, all contested installations returned, order oversight reduced to annual reporting only. In exchange, Adaize Okoro, designated diplomatic provocateur under Order Statute 31, would be extradited to face a procedural hearing. Outcome unspecified. Duration unspecified. It was, as face-saving mechanisms go, a reasonable one. The order could not admit that a junior diplomat and an excommunicated bureaucrat had paralyzed their enforcement process for 11 hours, using a legal petition and 23 signatures. They needed something. I was something. Surath intercepted the routing notification before it reached my comm unit. I didn't ask how the compact's internal systems were something they understood at a level that came from years of working inside them before the excommunication. They were at my quarters door at 0621, 2 minutes after the message was logged. Their chromatophores, cycling in a pattern I had learned, meant urgency. "I know," I said, before they could speak. "The routing notification had flagged on my secondary system anyway. You cannot accept." "I have an hour before Velsaroth arrives to deliver it formally," I said. "I'm not accepting anything yet." 1 hour is not very long. I spent the first 15 minutes reading Surath's reinstatement petition documentation, which I had filed in pieces over the past 11 hours and which was, as of 0600, technically complete and in queue for compact adjudication. The petition had 23 witness signatures. Under Article 41, a witness reinstatement petition with no procedural objections filed within 12 hours advances automatically to provisional status. No procedural objection had been filed. Velsaroth's cluster had been in chemical recess. At 0634, I filed the final section of the petition and flagged it for expedited review, citing the active diplomatic proceeding and the presence of 23 registered witnesses. At 0641, the compact's automatic adjudication system, the same system that had logged the original petition, the same system that did not require chemical consensus to operate, granted Surath provisional reinstatement pending full cluster review. Provisional reinstatement meant legal standing. Legal standing meant the right to exercise compact protections. One of those protections, Article 27, the one designed to prevent consensus clusters from being coerced through their individual members, was a formal shield designation. A reinstated compact member could extend shield designation to any party they had formally vouched for in an active legal proceeding. Surath had vouched for me in the chamber, in front of 31 species. It was on the record. At 0647, Surath filed a shield designation on my behalf with the compact's legal archive, 13 minutes before Velsaroth knocked on my quarters door. Velsaroth was not alone. They had 2 administrative witnesses from their cluster, which was standard for formal diplomatic delivery. Their chromatophores were running the cool pewter blue of official compact function. They had the look of someone who had reached consensus and was committed to it. "Okoro," they said, "I am delivering, on behalf of the Alien Order and the Duvari Compact, a formal extradition request under Statute 31. "I'm aware of the request," I said. "I'm responding under Article 27 of the Compact Charter. I am currently under formal shield designation, filed at 0647 this morning by Compact member Surath." Velsaroth stopped. Surath was standing behind me. Their chromatophores were gold, the deep, full gold that the briefing document said was theoretically impossible. I had seen it twice now. I was beginning to think the briefing documents were wrong about what Duvari were theoretically capable of. "Surath," Velsaroth said, "does not have standing." "Provisional reinstatement was granted at 0641, I said. 11 minutes before your extradition request was formally logged. The timeline is in the archive." The administrative witnesses were very still. One of them, a young cluster member, whose chromatophores kept flashing a distressed greenish-gray, quietly accessed their comm unit, checking the archive. Finding the timestamp, finding that it was, in fact, 0641, Velsaroth looked at Surath for a long time. There are things that happen between members of a species when they share a chemical language, and I am not wired to perceive them. But something passed between Velsaroth and Surath in that doorway that took 11 seconds and left both of them different at the end of it. "To proceed with extradition," Velsaroth said slowly, "we would require the agreement of the shielding party. Yes, I said. And the shielding party is Surath. Yes. Velsarath looked at Surath again. Will you withdraw the shield designation? Surath's chromatophores held gold. No, they said. Then we require full cluster consensus to override the shield designation, Velsarath said, which requires Surath's participation in consensus. Yes, I said. Surath would not vote to override their own shield designation. Probably not, I said. Velsarath was quiet for a long moment. Their pewter blue shifted, gradually, towards something I had no name for, something between gray and gold, a color that might have been the Duvari equivalent of a system encountering a problem outside its parameters and running anyway. You constructed this, Velsarath said. It was not an accusation. It was closer to a categorization, the way a scientist names a phenomenon. From the decon chamber, the card game, the chamber petition, the witnesses, the shield filing. You constructed this entire sequence. I made a friend, I said. The sequence came after. Velsarath looked at me for 4 seconds. Then, I will need to return to my cluster. I understand, I said. They left. The administrative witnesses left. The door closed, and the corridor outside was quiet. And Surath and I stood in my quarters, while the sanction vessel outside burned its last hours of station-keeping fuel, and the alien order tried to figure out what had just happened to them. The ceasefire was signed at 1,400 full terms. No extradition clause, the order removed it quietly, without explanation, which is what organizations do when they want to pretend a problem resolved itself. Velsarath filed a report to the Compact Council before departing Cathara 9. I am not supposed to have seen it. Surath showed it to me anyway, which is the kind of thing you do for someone when you are, by the standards of your species, theoretically not capable of making individual choices about information sharing, and you make one anyway. It said, humans do not build weapons, they build debts. The distinction is that debts are owed by people, and people act in ways that weapons do not. This analyst recommends that future interactions with human diplomatic representatives be classified under a new category, as existing compact frameworks do not adequately account for species that treat relationship formation as a primary strategic instrument. I read it twice. Then I went to find Surath. They were in the Cathara 9 mess hall, which smelled like 7 species worth of food preparation and was lit with the amber station lighting that came on after 1500. They had acquired something from the commissary that was almost certainly not food by any human standard, a translucent, faintly pulsing cube that smelled of copper, the way the decon chamber had smelled the first time we met. I got coffee, sat across from them. Outside the viewport, the sanction vessel was gone, and the transit gate was quiet, and the stars were doing what stars do, which is nothing. Because stars do not care about ceasefires, or shield designations, or the specific things a species will do for someone they played cards with in a cargo bay 11 hours before it mattered. 23 species cared. Their names were in an archive on a neutral station in the middle of nowhere, attached to a legal proceeding that had made it structurally impossible to shoot at us. Surath poked the translucent cube with one articulated finger. "Teach me another game," they said. I pulled a deck of cards from my jacket pocket. I carry them the way some people carry a multi-tool you never know what you'll need to open. "This one," I said, "is better with more players." Surath's chromatophores held gold, steady and full, and I dealt the first hand. And outside the viewport, the stars continued their long indifference. But inside the mess hall, on Cathara 9, something had changed in the record of what humans were and what humans did. And the 23 names in the archive would not be unwritten. And that, as it turned out, had been enough.